Friday the 13th, Hate, Kill, Repeat, by Jason Arnott. Chapter 4. The sense of foreboding was intense. She was tempted to turn the car around right there and then. Whenever Denzella told intrigued strangers that she was a professional psychic, the same question arose with dull predictability. Could she foresee bad things happening to herself? Whoever posed this question to her always believed it to be the very height of wit and hilarity. Luckily, she was able to reply that yes, she could. That always shut the skeptics up. One time, she had avoided a highway, having had a bad feeling about it. Minutes later, a pileup had wiped out close to 20 people. She was convinced that she would have been at the epicenter of that carnage. Ever since the "Welcome to Clear Waters" sign, a mile back, the dark feeling had begun to wash over her. There was the sense that the storm she had described to Halo was closer than she had imagined. The difference this time was that she felt personally threatened. Her throat felt dry and sore. The road continued to rush beneath her wheels. She sighed deeply, struggling to decide. She was hardly ever wrong, so should she go back? Maybe she was just freaking herself out, but somehow she didn't think so. If today's job hadn't been so lucrative, she would have swung around and driven out of town already. But she was due to give a tarot reading for a relatively rich couple who wanted assurances that their firstborn child, due in 5 months, would be healthy. They were offering good money that would help pay for her ticket back to Joburg to see the family at Christmas. Damn it! She spat and stomped on the accelerator. As the trees flashed by faster, the road narrowed. Denzella checked her watch. It was 13:13. Surely there couldn't be much further to go. Her throat was so sore it was difficult to swallow. She slapped one hand over it in a vain attempt to quell the pain. Then she saw him. Standing in the middle of the road was a huge man wearing a hockey mask. In one hand he carried an axe. His body language exuded power and defiance. Denzella knew he would not move to avoid the impact. She also felt the storm washing over her in all its dark fury. This was the man-child she had warned the girl about. These thoughts came to her in the first second. In the next, she wrenched the steering wheel around, careering off the track and missing the hulking figure by mere feet. Speeding down a slope, her brakes proving ineffectual no matter how hard she worked them. She finally hit a tree and the engine died. Jason appeared at the top of the slope, axe hung by his side. He began to make his descent. Norwood Thon drummed his fingers on the top of the steering wheel. He had refilled the gas tank 10 minutes ago. Where was Penelope? The woman was so impetuous, so impulsive. 1 minute she was reading USA Today in the passenger seat. The next she had ordered him to pull over into a gas station. They had almost caused a freeway pileup in the process, and this wasn't a prospect Norwood liked. Apart from the damage that might have been done to themselves, various innocent people might have died. He prided himself in maintaining some semblance of optimism. Some innocent people still remained on this planet. Shame that the sinners had to go and ruin it for everyone. He considered the vehicle for a moment. Once this tank had been used up, they would have to find another mode of transport. He favored the idea of varying the type of vehicles they drove and the accommodation they took. Over the last few weeks, they had only lowered themselves to sleep in their vehicle twice. Otherwise, they had mainly stayed in motels. 2 reasons for this. Such establishments allowed them to meet the kind of people who needed their attention, whether they knew it or not. Also, motels accepted cash. Far more difficult to trace. They gave blatantly fake names under every roof. Those people just didn't care. You'd practically have to kill them in order to get a reaction. He peered through the windshield into the gas station store. Until a few minutes ago, Penelope had been standing at the desk talking to the woman. They had been smiling. The woman had handed something over. Neither of them were visible. Norwood frowned, drumming his fingers harder. Then he picked up the crumpled USA Today and spread it out over the dashboard. Frowning, he tried to work out what had excited his precious Penelope so. Was it an article about their little spree? He zeroed in on a relatively modest-looking piece, a text-only news bite, in a side column. He smiled knowingly. Police had reopened investigations into the supposed killer Jason Voorhees, it said. They were dragging the former Crystal Lake after repeated requests from Tina Shepard and her boyfriend. The couple had survived a massacre by the lake, which many still believed they had orchestrated themselves. Both remained incarcerated pending further investigations. Norwood traced his forefinger down the side of the article. His eyesight wasn't quite what it used to be, and he had lost his spectacles somewhere between Chicago and here. There was a quote from a local detective who effectively said, "Once we've proven Jason doesn't exist, we can go ahead and jail these kids for good." He understood. Penelope wanted to go to Crystal Lake. She had long held a fascination with Jason Voorhees, as had he to a lesser degree. The press had painted Voorhees as a moral crusader, as he always seemed to target promiscuous, drug-taking teens, an ethos with which Norwood heartily sympathized. Movement caught his eye, and he looked over to see that Penelope had reappeared. She walked swiftly around the counter, paused to pick something up, a map by the looks of it, then she was out of the door. Norwood glanced over around the gas station, seeing that the only other customer had just pulled out. They were unlikely to have seen anything, not that any foul play had been visible. As she climbed back into the Pontiac, he raised a wry eyebrow. "So, we're off to Crystal Lake, are we?" She was sweating slightly and flushed. "Darling, I'd love to. Did you read the article? Jason may still be operating. I think the three of us would get on famously. We have the same goals." Norwood looked at her uncertainly for a second, then nodded back toward the gas station. "What happened in there?" he asked. "She propositioned me with her eyes." Norwood shook his head sadly as he started the engine. "Oh dear." "We went into the back room and I started to enjoy it. The temptress almost had me." Norwood ground his teeth together. "That filthy Jezebel!" Thankfully, I controlled myself. As they left the gas station, Penelope's hand was snaking onto Norwood's crotch, undoing his zipper. "Tell me more about the sinner," he intoned, voice cracking. The Pontiac was soon lost in the traffic's incessant flow. Halo made sure she was sitting in the back. After all, Duke was driving. She knew that he wasn't beyond sliding the odd hand onto her thigh, whether Trey was present or not. If seen, he'd simply pass it off as a joke. She was loath to admit it, even to herself, but Duke frightened Halo more than Trey did. Her boyfriend had problems, there was no denying that, but at least he was honest about them. There was something dark and conniving about Duke. By contrast, the man's brother Basket was a more straightforward soul, even if his eyes didn't strictly point in the same direction. She had known Duke, Basket, and Shona almost as long as she'd known Trey. When you started seeing a guy, you generally inherited a new circle of potential buddies, whether you liked it or not. Of course, if you ever split up with the man, they would vanish from your life like ghosts, but that was understood. Trey had met Duke a few years ago at the auto garage where they still both worked, and their macho relationship grew from there. They were all about beer, football, and showing off the alleged benefit of women. Basket had come bundled with Duke as part of the package. Even if the two brothers regularly argued like crazy. No one seemed to know what Basket did for a living, but you could rest assured that it wasn't a great deal. He was an extremely lazy, laid-back guy with a limited attention span and an extremely low IQ. Perfectly lovable, though. Halo had been delighted when Basket met Shona 3 months ago. It finally gave the group a welcome injection of estrogen. They had celebrated with their first camping trip to Clearwater, where they had a fairly good time, enjoyable apart from Duke and Basket coming to blows not once but twice during their 24-hour stay. So here it was, Clearwater's round number 2. Place your bets, ladies and gentlemen. Who would punch whom first? She hoped the answer wouldn't be Trey laying a good one on her again. Her man presently sat in the front of the Camaro next to Duke. He still seemed pissed about her disappearing act this morning. Hopefully, she thought, he'll cheer up when Halo told him our good news. The Camaro was anything but a smooth ride. All 5 occupants bounced up and down, practically non-stop. "How long till we get there?" asked Shona, seated between Halo and Basket. "'Bout another half hour," said Duke. "Why, Princess? You getting travel sick?" Princess, thought Halo. Well, at least he's a slimeball with all the girls. "Hey, Halo," said Duke. "Pass your favorite guy a beer from the cooler, would you?" Halo was relieved when everyone, even Trey, sounded jeers of protest. "You're driving, asshole," said Basket, throwing a toothpick at the back of his brother's head. Duke smiled to himself. "I just wanted to see if she'd do it. Reckon you've got yourself a nice little slave there, man." He was talking to Trey, who shook his head. "Yeah, right," he said ruefully. "Get real, guys," said Shona, playfully pinching Basket's nose. "We're not slaves, and you're not ours. We can walk away whenever we like, so watch your fucking mouths." "That's right," giggled Halo, hoping that Trey wouldn't get her later. She was determined not to die, not like this. When Denzella left Johannesburg to spend a year touring around the States, earning money from her psychic gift, friends warned her that America was violent, to which she had laughed long and loud considering how brutal South Africa could be. In fact, Johannesburg was one of the nation's most violent cities. She had personally lost 2 friends to random acts of carjacking savagery. So America seemed almost like home. Besides, with her 2 kids grown up and self-sufficient, she wanted to take life by the throat and see some of the world. Being a mother was the best job in the world, and she would happily argue the life out of anyone who debated that fact. But it undeniably pins you down. She'd first become a mother at the relatively young age of 24. The next 20 years consisted of work, stress, maternal duties, and sadly, divorce. Still, she was free to do whatever she wanted, finally at liberty to fully exercise the unusual ability she always knew that she possessed. So far, America had proven a very receptive country, and certainly nowhere near as intimidating as many people seemed to think it was. Until a minute ago when it suddenly became an absolute nightmare. Denzilla pushed her car door open with surprising ease, considering that the impact had buckled it. She felt dizzy and blood was trickling down the side of her face. She must have banged her head on the steering wheel, she realized. Jumping out of the vehicle, she hadn't paused to look back over her shoulder. Every nerve in her body was screaming at her to keep moving, away from the storm. She could feel this man's hatred, like an eternal flame blazing close by. He was coming for her, and he would have no mercy. She broke into a tentative canter, keen to get away as quickly as possible, but cautious about injuring herself further and becoming an easy target. Relieved to discover that her legs seemed in good working order, she quickened the pace. She started running, concentrating on maintaining a good speed, while avoiding trees and ground obstacles. Her sarong wasn't the most practical of garments for sprinting, but she bunched much of its lower half up in one of her fists. After the number of times she had scoffed at females tripping over and spraining their ankles during horror movies, it would be too horrible an irony to do just that. The sense of foreboding was stronger than ever. In fact, her death seemed so certain that part of her was tempted to turn around and shriek, "Come on, you bastard, take me!" But she had always been a fighter. Perhaps if she knew what was going to happen, she also had the power to change it. A slim hope, but hope nevertheless. Ahead of her, the woods showed no sign of change. They merely continued. More trees, more bushes, more stuff to run through. She tried to cast her mind back to studying the area map, but she had only been looking at her destination and the roads that led to it. She had to face facts. She had no idea where she was or where she was going. The breath rasped in her throat, and her head swam. She brought herself to a halt. The woods were silent, save for a few bird noises. She bent and rested her hands on her knees, seeing thick spots of blood on the ground. She quickly realized they had fallen from a wound on her forehead. She had no time to worry about this. It was time to move onwards. With one last glance back along the empty trail, Denzella once again set off on her heels. He hated to show it, but Ed Daimler was fairly impressed with his new partner's professionalism. They had arrived at the 8-Ball Motel 20 minutes ago, a mere 12 hours or so after the victims had died. The place was a dump, the very definition of the term low rent. The bodies had been removed, but Daimler could still detect the unmistakable reek of death in the room numbered 9. The FBI's own forensics team had muscled in. This was a job for the Bureau, given the multi-state nature of the killing spree. A specialist named Mick Dunvey was sitting down in a nearby diner with Daimler, Van Stadt, and local homicide detective Dino Gonzalez. Between them on the table was a folder containing crime scene photos and various forensics reports. After Dunvey talked them through the pictures, being sure to cover them every time their overly attentive waitress approached, it was time to talk theories. Perhaps because of the hangover, which he couldn't seem to shake, Daimler was content to sit back and let Van Stadt make the lion's share of observations, which she did, piecing together a comprehensive picture of what exactly might have happened to Kitty Lou Maynard, Bud Dyer, and Kyle Coopersmith. She was wearing a pair of wire-rimmed spectacles, which Daimler thought made her look extremely cute. The motel room's door lock had not been forced, she noted, so the trio must have either known the attackers or invited them in, believing them to be unthreatening. Perhaps they might have met in the same bar where these three met, she offered, before going on to examine the wounds inflicted. Despite the fact that the female was raped, the absence of semen suggests that the aggressor used a condom, which means that these people aren't going on impulse. They're intelligent enough to take precautions, and they don't want to be caught. At least not yet, interrupted Daimler. I have a feeling that they're enjoying the visibility they're getting in the press. You know, he cleared his throat. These people have a point to make. I'm surprised they haven't already made direct contact with either us or the press. I don't understand, said Gonzalez. What exactly is the point they're making? They're raping and killing people. Daimler raised a finger to his lips and frowned. Gonzalez had been talking very loudly, and eyebrows were starting to rise among the family sitting adjacent to their table. Sorry, nodded the detective, but they're doing all this shit, and you say they're some kind of moral crusaders? That's where their delusion kicks in, said Daimler, knocking back the cool dregs of the day's third coffee. He was starting to crave a stronger drink. They may be genuinely convinced that what they're doing is perfectly just. Is there a religious aspect here? Asked Gonzalez. I don't think it's religious exactly, said Van Stat. Maybe just moralistic. These people have a strong sense of what's right and wrong, and unlike most people, they're willing to do something about it. You sound as though you admire that, said Gonzalez, looking half serious. He then shuffled awkwardly in his seat. Van Stat's only reply was a withering stare. Do you think they're still in the area? He said, turning his attention to Daimler. Maybe, Daimler offered vaguely, feeling wretched. At present, he really had no idea. It was a relief when the waitress brought them the check. Daimler and Van Stat joined Gonzalez for an informal interview with the clerk, who had been working at the 8-Ball Motel last night. They had no idea whether their unsubs had actually stayed in the room, but intended to find out. The clerk's name was Jimmy Reeve, called back to the motel from his apartment. He clearly hadn't been planning to do much on this, his day off. His glazed eyes positively shrieked of marijuana. They were sitting in a small, untidy office, and Reeve looked terrified, drinking coffee like it was going out of fashion. Daimler suppressed a smile, knowing just how paranoid Reeve would be feeling right now. In his mid-20s, the guy probably expected to be booked for smoking dope or blamed for the murders. As Gonzalez and Van Stat discussed some preliminary points, Daimler leaned forward and whispered to Reeve, "Don't worry, Jim. We don't care what you do for recreation." In Daimler's considerable experience, when innocent and potentially vital witnesses were tense, their memory cells had a nasty tendency to clog up. Reeve nodded earnestly. "Thanks, man," he muttered. "Do you guys mind if I smoke?" Van Stat turned to him. "I'm afraid I do." Great going, Melissa, thought Daimler. Make the guy all nervy again, for the sake of a little passive smog. So, were you at the front desk from 10 until 7 this morning? Asked Gonzalez, checking his notes. That's right. Killer shift, huh? Reeve laughed nervously. Now, I realize this isn't exactly the Ritz, began Daimler, but during that time, did you see anybody suspicious checking in? I've been racking my brains, man, racking them. Came up with nothing. I mean, it was the regular crowd pretty much. So what's the regular crowd? Asked Daimler. Young couples, older guys with hookers, escorts, who just want a room for an hour or two, maybe a family on a real cheap vacation. Daimler chewed this over. Did you see any older couples, anyone who might not normally stay at a roach motel? Reeve looked almost offended. Oh, we don't have roaches, man, he protested before inferring from Van Stat's pointed look that it didn't matter. Sorry, let me see. Daimler watched as the inner cogs of Reeve's brain struggled to spin. God, I need a drink, he thought. Perhaps I should excuse myself for a moment and take a swig in the restroom. Reeve shrugged. I'm sorry. I really can't remember anyone. Daimler sank back into his chair and rubbed his tired eyes with 2 middle fingers. If it looked like a covert way of saying fuck you to this useless dopehead, then he was frankly past caring. "Wait! There was one couple," said Reeves suddenly, his eyes widening. "At least I thought they were a couple. It was an older guy, well, middle-aged, and a slightly younger woman. They spoke kinda..." Daimler leaned forward, winding his hands around each other as if trying to simulate the gray matter. "They spoke like they were from high society, but southern. They were well-spoken people. At first I thought it was just another old guy with a working girl. But when she spoke, I knew she was no hooker, man. At least not your escort. At least not your average escort." "It's fine, hooker. Just tell me more about what they look like," said Daimler. As Reeves spoke, Daimler began to build up a mental picture, and it seemed to correspond to the vague visual profile he had established. Good-looking, well-presented, just the kind of people you wouldn't expect to commit multiple homicides. "Okay," said Van Stat when Reeve had wrung his brain dry. "Which room were they in?" "Oh, they didn't get a room. They looked around the place like it was infested with roaches, which it really isn't, and left." Daimler and Van Stat looked at each other. Gonzalez's phone rang and he held it to his head. The room fell silent as he listened, then dropped the phone back into an inside pocket. He gestured for Reeve to beat it, and the kid lumbered out of the door. "Sounds like they struck again," he said. "A gas station attendant further upstate." Daimler nodded and frowned at the same time. "A gas station attendant. That sounds unusual, if it's them." "Why is that unusual?" asked Gonzalez. "There must be CCTV footage," said Van Stat quietly. "We must have them on camera." The car had been silent for some time. Penelope was staring into the mirror, retouching her makeup. Norwood solemnly watched the road. "You know what you've done, don't you?" he finally said. "Yes, dear," sighed Penelope. "I got myself on camera. But did you really think I'd leave without taking this?" Norwood looked over, and relief flooded over his face. She was holding a video cassette. "You beautiful thing, you," he grinned. She could see the water, in the distance through a multitude of tall, twisted trees. Denzella could see a sparkling blue mass. She told herself it must be the lake. She continued her pace. It was amazing, she noted, what you could do when your life was in danger. Yet she knew that safety might still be a long way off. The water drew closer, and Denzella could soon see that it was indeed the lake. The water bounced hazily up and down in her field of vision. The axe caught her in the throat. The speed at which she was traveling worsened the impact, allowing the blade to sever the head with ease. Denzella watched from the ground as the rest of her body ran away from her, skidding to a clumsy halt, further along the track. Then, mercifully, darkness took her. Jason turned and made his way back along the path, the axe dripping with blood by his side. Chapter 5. Tom Sheridan wasn't so sure how he felt about this conference. He had been with Intrax for 3 years now, since he was 21. Coming out of college back in Philadelphia, bagging a job with this corporate giant seemed the greatest thing in the world. He enjoyed the admiration of ladies, joy and relief from his folks, and envy from many of his peers. Even the latter had been welcome. At the time he'd taken it to be an indication that he was doing something right. The job he initially took wasn't particularly impressive in and of itself, but it was in the right place, the marketing department in Trax's magazine and media division. Tom soon made an impression with his superiors, not least for his ability to devise effective ideas for campaigns. He soon came to learn that most of these notions would be stolen and passed off as having originated from his superiors, but that, he told himself, was the game. The main thing was that his line managers, the people he directly answered to, knew he could deliver. The fact that they then went to their line managers with the supposedly first-hand idea was something he was willing to live with. His relaxed attitude eventually paid off. 6 months ago, he received the kind of promotion which just wasn't supposed to happen. He shot up from a lowly marketing assistant to marketing coordinator, the kind of advancement that it generally took 10 years for people to achieve. Once again, he had encountered ripples of everything from genuine joy at his advancement to flat-out resentment. The man he had to thank for his rocket ship ascent was Larry Bruckenheim, the division's managing director. Bruckenheim had been in the business for over 30 years, having started at the same age as Tom, and he must have developed the second sight. Even though Tom's immediate superiors bled him dry for ideas at every available opportunity, Larry seemed to see through their thieving and recognize Tom as a creative goldmine. Of course, the interview had helped. When the marketing coordinator position became available, Tom had decided to go for the job, and really go for it. With only 3 days to go before the interview, Tom had sacrificed sleep to prepare. Bruckenheim himself didn't attend the actual interview, but word soon got to him that Sheridan had arrived with a list of 101 new marketing strategies for Intrax Media. He'd practically written a book. Larry Bruckenheim had apparently leaned back in his legendary office, offering a 180-degree view out over downtown Philly, and said, "That's our man!" This without even seeing the 101 suggestions. Tom could still remember the look on his friend Greg Spiner's face when he gave him the news. Greg had also gone for the job, and Tom was anxious that there be no bad feelings about the outcome. Greg had made a good show of it, slapping him on the back and exuding all the expected congratulatory bluster, but Tom had noticed that the smile never reached his friend's eyes. Since that day, their friendship had changed. They still hung out together and went through the motions, but the heart and soul was missing. Greg was sitting next to him at the wheel of the BMW, his red hair poked out in shocking tufts through his backward baseball cap, his T-shirt and shorts displaying his shamefully pale arms and legs. At least, thought Tom, employees were allowed to dress casually for the event. This was only fair, seeing as it was taking up pretty much the whole weekend. Most people in the marketing department seemed thrilled by the prospect of Intrax's latest annual social event. Cheers had actually sounded when it had been announced. Once upon a time, Tom had felt exactly the same way. He had seen the Intrax weekend as an opportunity to network, get to know important people on a more relaxed basis. This was the way that Greg still saw it. So did April Mather. She was slumped across the back seats, dressed up to the nines, as though they were heading to a nightclub at midnight. April didn't do informal. She wanted to look great at all times. While Tom knew she was a screamingly superficial piece of work, he couldn't seem to stop himself from sleeping with her. It had been going on for almost a month. Tom hoped that Greg was the only person within the company who knew about them. April was, after all, Tom's PA. It was textbook office sexual behavior, but Tom seemed unable to help himself. Tom's newly acquired status wasn't the reason for the decline of his enthusiasm for the Intrax weekend. The corporate world was starting to grind him down. It made him feel hollow. A little wine, April, and song seemed to help temporarily paper over the cracks that were forming in his mind, even though he realized that she was wrong for him. She worked for Intrax, for one thing. She was cold as ice, too. April was pure crack cocaine, an ecstatic fix, but not the best habit to adopt long term. In retrospect, he sorely regretted confiding in Greg about their clandestine relationship. They had been propping up a bar, nursing their 6th or 7th beer, with a totally ludicrous side shot of Jägermeister. No wonder Tom had suddenly felt the need to blurt out the fact that he was banging his assistant. Hell, he would have told Larry Bruckenheim himself if he'd joined them. That was then. He, April, and Greg were speeding through Crystal Lake, the chosen location for this year's Intrax weekend. In less than 20 minutes, Greg was saying they would arrive at the Phoenix Heights Hotel. "I checked it out on the net," he said. "The place only opened last year. It got redeveloped on the grounds of a huge old apartment block, gutted from the base up. Let's hope they're already made their mistakes and learnt from them." "Typical of you, Spiner," laughed Tom. "You're getting a free weekend at a luxury hotel, and you're concerned that service mightn't be up to scratch." Greg shrugged. "I very much doubt it'll be luxury. Have you looked out of the fucking windows during the last 10 minutes or so? This is Deliverance country, boy." "It's not that bad," said Tom. He turned to face his secret girlfriend. "What do you think?" April pulled an indifferent face. "It doesn't exactly look like heaven to me." "So?" said Greg. Tom hated it when Greg started the sentence with "so." It generally meant that he was about to say something embarrassing. So, did you guys get one room between you? No way, said April. Thanks, Tom Mock huffed at her. No, I mean, we could have had one room, but Mr. Sensitive here still doesn't want anyone to know about us. It's not that, protested Tom. No, said April. Tom saw her wide, challenging eyes in the rearview mirror. What is it then, Tom? Now then, you guys, said Greg, grinning. He was enjoying this. Let's have no trouble. We're all friends here. Hey, slow down a little, April told him. There's a junction coming up. Tom peered ahead. The BMW was indeed speeding towards a spot where two roads entwined. We're in the country, said Greg. Apart from us suits, they all walk, don't they? They all lope around with their fucking Rottweilers chewing straw. Slow down, insisted Tom. As soon as he said this, he recognized his mistake. Giving Greg an order seemed to spark the man's resentment for Tom's superior position. And we're speeding up, he yelled, stomping the accelerator. We're not in the office now, Tommy boy. This is my car. Fuck you, Greg, yelled April. Slow the fuck down. Another order badly received. Greg kept his foot on the accelerator. Look at you guys, he chuckled as the engine roared, like a couple of frightened little lovebirds. What's the matter with you? Winced Tom, gripping the sides of his seat. There's a junction right ahead, said Halo. As usual, she was the sensible one holding the map. As usual, she was the smallest voice in a sea of bad listeners. Said Duke in reply. Man, we are going to rip it up tonight. He rocked to and fro against the wheel. Hell yeah, chimed in Basket. This seemed the man's favorite expression. Whenever he was in doubt, Basket always opted for a hell yeah. Hey, you guys, I can't wait no more, said Shona, her voice suddenly cracking with excitement. We were going to wait until we got to camp, but... She paused, smiling as though a big announcement was coming. Halo saw Basket's hand lightly grab Shona's arm, like a gesture of support. Well, what the hell is it? Said Duke. Would you like a drum roll? Fuck that, grinned Trey next to him. You suck at drums. I'm the man when it comes to that shit. He mimed a drum roll on the dashboard. Hey now, said Basket indignantly. Me and the little lady have something to tell y'all. Trey and Duke shut up and listened. What is it, guys? Smiled Halo, feeling an odd tightness in her stomach. She never reacted well to tension of any kind, even if it was leading up to good news. We're going to have a baby, roared Shona. Halo's heart fluttered. Basket punched the air, almost catching the back of Trey's head. Hell yeah! Fuck, gasped Duke, glaring back at Basket. How come I wasn't told about this? I'm your fucking blood, dude. We just wanted to tell everyone together, said Shona. Fine, shrugged Duke. Well, congratulations, little brother and little lady. Congratulations, you guys, said Halo. Her eyes were fixed on the side of Trey's head. It was difficult to see how he was responding to the news. Then it came. Well done, guys, he said, turning to slap palms with Basket and Shona. Better you than me, that's all I can say. Halo's heart plummeted somewhere down between her knees. Her throat went dry. Trey threw her a glance. No shitty diapers for us, right, honey? Halo's smile was so fake she couldn't even believe that he took it on face value. She shook her head, feeling like the bottom had dropped out of her world. I'm serious, said Tom, beads of sweat forming around his brow. Slow down, Greg, please. This seemed to be the magic word which Greg wanted to hear. A little bit of kowtowing from the man who was his boss back in Philly. He eased off the gas and the BMW ate slightly less road. Voila, he cried. Slower! Tom and April breathed sighs of relief. Tom could sense that April was fuming and wanted to lay into Greg, but didn't want to risk him pulling any more stunts. He felt much the same. Suddenly, Greg spun the wheel. The BMW drifted into the left lane. Slower, he repeated. But in the wrong goddamn lane. Sweet Jesus, we're all gonna die. Tom realized that his friend had waved goodbye to all vestiges of sanity. He couldn't let this pass, even if he did fear confrontation with the passion. Reaching over, he grabbed one side of the steering wheel. Get the hell off, shouted Greg, eyes flashing wildly as he fought to keep the BMW in the wrong lane. Jesus Christ, screamed April. There's another car coming! Halo saw it first, some kind of flash car speeding directly toward them. At that moment, Duke and Trey were looking at each other, babbling their usual bullshit. Duke, look out! The words spilled out of her mouth in a garble. Duke returned his attention to the road. Oh my fucking God! The BMW was getting bigger by the second. Greg's face went even paler than usual as he saw the oncoming Camaro. Tom saw the Camaro too, and let go of the wheel. He didn't know why, but the rational part of his brain must have deduced that if he and Greg continued to fight over control of the BMW, they might remain on this side of the road and hit the other vehicle full on. But Greg didn't do anything apart from looking mortified. Spin the wheel! April roared. Greg did nothing. Less than 15 feet separated the cars. Duke leaned back against his seat, as though trying to distance himself from the collision. Halo had prayed that the BMW would realize its mistake and change lanes. She assumed that Duke had been thinking the same thing. But what if both drivers had assumed that the other would switch? She leaned forward into the crash position that she'd seen people adopt in airplane disaster movies. Then the Camaro howled and lurched as Duke spun the wheel. Oh, fuck! Halo recognized Trey's voice. She clasped her hands over her ears, for all the good it would do her. Seeing that the other car was changing direction finally seemed to galvanize Greg. He wrenched the steering wheel the opposite way. Tom held his breath. April screamed again. The two vehicles clashed as they passed each other. There was a ragged metallic whine. Then the Camaro was gone. Tom surveyed the rearview mirror. The other car was careering off the road, steadily slowing down. Greg, too, was piling on the brakes, and the BMW soon shuddered to a halt, the engine dying. In the back, April seemed to be in shock. Tom looked at Greg in disbelief. The man's face was deathly white, clammy, with sweat. Greg, what is wrong with you? He gasped. Greg shook his head slowly, his eyes fixed on the rearview mirror and flooded with fear. Tom looked, too. The occupants of the Camaro were clambering out. Some of them were yelling abuse. The biggest among them, whom Tom recalled as having been the terror-stricken driver, was examining the side of his vehicle. Greg's hand jittered as he reached for the ignition keys. We've got to get out of here, he murmured. Two of the men were walking purposefully toward the BMW. Tom grabbed Greg's wrist as tightly as he could. No, we won't. We'll stay right here and make sure the others are all right. The men, who looked pissed, were within feet of their car. Tom opened his door and stepped out. He swallowed hard, registering the fury in Trey and Basket's eyes. Look, I'm really sorry, he said, holding both palms up in defense. Are you guys hurt? Duke was walking toward them too, tree-trunk arms bulging out of his sleeveless leather waistcoat. My fucking paintwork, he snarled. Greg was still in the driver's seat. He wound down the window on the passenger side and addressed the newcomers. Tom grabbed the wheel. The guy's a maniac. Trey grabbed Tom by the collar, scrunching his shirt and swinging him around. Tom was almost relieved when he hit one side of the BMW with a sickening clang. At least it had a stabilizing effect. April cranked her window down. You lay the hell off him, she cried. Our driver's the fucking maniac. He's a coward, too. Tom tried to keep his composure as he stared into Trey's beady, animalistic eyes. Their faces were inches apart, and the guy's breath washed over him. Here was a mouth which hadn't welcomed a dentist in years. We'll pay for the damage, he said. You sure will, motherfucker, said Duke. You're going to pay right now. Halo felt shaky, but wasn't about to let matters degenerate. She'd seen Trey, and especially Duke, reduce people to quivering bags of fractured bone in the past. Hey, she called out, approaching the besieged BMW, which had also suffered major cosmetic damage. Greg's car had lost whole chunks of its light blue finish. Chill out, guys. We're all right. We didn't get hurt. Duke jabbed a thumb into his exposed, hairless chest. And who do you have to thank for that? You, she said. Thank God you turned the wheel. But don't hurt these people. It was an accident. She caught Trey's eye. Let him go, honey. Trey hesitated. Please, honey, just let him go. Trey pushed Tom against the BMW, then released his grip. As he did so, Halo couldn't help but notice that Tom was gorgeous. Chiseled cheeks, blue eyes, good skin. Not unlike Trey after a makeover and an anger management course. She brushed aside this thought in the space of a second, but it surprised her. She couldn't remember the last time she had looked at someone in that way. Perhaps it was Trey's conditioning. She'd become afraid to even acknowledge another man's presence, in case he blew a gasket. Face reddened, Halo ran a hand through her long hair. Then, seeing that the beautiful man was still in danger of assault from Duke, she gently grasped the big guy's bicep. "Calm it down, Luke," she said. The muscle contracted beneath her palm. Duke was seething. Luckily, Basket seemed to agree with Halo. "Come on, bro," he muttered in Duke's ears, stepping between him and a perspiring Tom. "Leave it." "Greg, give the guy your insurance details," said April. "Don't be a chicken shit." Halo didn't like the look of Greg. He resembled a shrew. The creepy guy was making a big show of appearing victimized, but she could tell that he'd been to blame for the accident. He was the driver, for crying out loud. Duke stomped around to Greg's side of the BMW and sternly accepted what the shrew had to offer. Tom locked eyes with Halo. "Thanks," he said quietly. "I was almost hamburger there." "No problem." She momentarily wished they could look into each other's eyes some more. She wondered whether he felt the same. Still, she could already feel Trey's contempt and turned to him, wrapping her hands around his waist. That usually did the trick of placating the green-eyed beast. He protectively slung an arm around her back and stared at Tom. Halo sighed. Would she be in for the third degree later, when he was drunk? Oh, the delights in store for her on this relaxing break. After a few uneasy minutes, everyone headed back to their rides. Halo smiled at Tom, but they shared no further eye contact. As she climbed back into the Camaro, she felt the heavy weight of disappointment, as though a door to another life had opened and abruptly slammed shut in her face. The Camaro resumed its journey, turning into the junction that would take it through the final stretch of road to clear waters. "Can't say I feel much like having fun now," said Shona, clutching her belly as though calming her unborn child. "Oh, that was nothing," said Basket. "Few beers will be fine." Shona punched his arm. "I can't drink any more, Dumbo." "I know," he replied. "I said we'll be fine. All the more beer for us, right, Halo?" Halo grinned lightly. Then she began to work on suitable excuses for passing on alcohol. This whole weekend. God, this wasn't the way things were supposed to be for a 19-year-old. She'd barely gotten to grips with the idea of finding a job. Not that she didn't want to work. She had no problem with that concept, even if she still believed that the accumulated stress of her mother's factory job helped breed the cancer that ultimately claimed her. No, it was more the fact that she couldn't believe anyone would employ her. Why couldn't she be more confident, like her big sister? She was such a go-getter. "Well, I'll be a son of a fucker," said Duke after a while, glancing into his wing mirror. "Those losers are going to the same place as us." The Camaro was indeed on the same road now, heading in the same direction. It hung back, keeping a safe distance. "Oh, great," said Trey. He turned to Halo. "I'll bet you're real pleased, girl. You might get to see Mr. Cute Cheeks again, huh?" Halo feigned confusion. He scowled and presented her with the side of his head once again. "I'm sorry, Greg. I don't care whose car it is. I'm driving." "That's pretty obvious, Tom. No problem. Guess you guys can make your own way back to Philly when this weekend's done." April had been slumped in the back seat, seemingly exhausted by the events of the last 15 minutes. At this, however, she piped up. "After this, you asshole? I'd rather crawl back. Don't talk to me again." Greg folded his arms. "No problem, April." Tom rolled his eyes. He knew there'd been a reason why he was dreading this convention more than ever before. He slowed the BMW as a battered pickup truck, which looked like it used to be blue, rolled out of a side road. For a moment, the two vehicles blocked each other's path. Tom saw that the driver was a bearded man in his 50s, with curled, graying hair and eyes like balls of hot coal. He looked like a farmer. Sitting on the seat next to him was a shotgun, propped up to point at the roof. The man stared at Tom, agitated. He clearly wanted to be somewhere fast, but wasn't about to compromise. There was something unnerving about him, as though his humanity had ebbed. Having had enough confrontation for one day, Tom allowed the BMW to edge back. At least it would give the Camaro a head start. The farmer maintained eye contact for a few seconds. Then he returned his attention to the road and focused once again on wherever he was going. The pickup truck gained speed and soon turned a corner out of sight. "What was that guy's problem?" asked April. "I don't know," murmured Tom. but I sure wouldn't want it to be me. Okay, this has been chapters 4 and 5 of Friday the 13th, Hate, Kill, Repeat. Hope you're enjoying it so far. Thank you to everybody who left the comments, checking on me and everything after y'all found out that I'd been hit by a tornado the other night. We just got the power back on tonight, so I went ahead and did what yesterday's upload was supposed to be, which was Jason X, Planet of the Beast. And since I did that, I went ahead and knocked out these 2 chapters, so everybody got Sunday's upload as well. I'll be back tomorrow with Jason X, Planet of the Beast, some more chapters of that. And then on Tuesday, I'll be back with some more of Hate, Kill, Repeats. Hope everybody's enjoying the book. I am. Drop me a comment. Let me know what you think. Just want to say hello. I love to hear from you guys. Click the like button. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't done so already. Check out the Double Book giveaway video. The title is 500 Subscribers Double Book Giveaway Contest. It gives you the details on how to win the current giveaway. There's still about 10 days, 9 or 10 days left before I do the drawing. So you have plenty of time to get involved and get your name in the hat to win 2 of these rare Black Flame novels. Alright guys, I will see y'all next time. This has been the 80s Slasher Librarian saying thanks for listening, and don't click that thumbs down button because
it's got a death curse!